Wine. It's simply crushed and fermented grapes. The variations in the stories are what make it so fascinating. Vineyard practices like trellising methods, dry farming or irrigating, fertilizing, cover crops, biodynamic practices, head pruning, using sheep and goats and insectiaries. There are so many varieties of grapes, and then different clones and different rootstocks. The variations in wine are beyond comprehension, and the stories behind the wines are as lush and beautiful as the wines themselves. Our goal at Crush Grape Chronicles is to explore and chronicle the grape, its many stories, and its journey from dirt to glass.
Yeah, I'm really happy with this map because it shows soils. So you have to turn this is
Right.
south, right?
South, and that's north.
So do you know about the Missoula Floods?
A little bit,
Okay,
but
so
pretend I don't.
Let's start with that. So at the end of the last ice age, maybe 15,000 years ago, 14,000 years ago, up in the areas of Idaho, Montana, and all that, the glaciers were coming out of the Rockies, and as they were melting, all this water was coming down. There's a spot in Idaho where there was a big cut in the mountains, and that was filled with an ice plug, so to speak, like a big glacial ice plug. And behind it created a lake, they call it Lake Missoula, that was bigger than Lake Superior, and I mean, it was really, really big, lots of water. And as the pressure started building because of the water melting, the lake getting bigger and bigger, that plug of ice lifted, and a wall of water 500 feet tall, miles wide, came rushing down from Idaho all the way down what's now the Columbia River, all the way to the ocean, carrying untold amounts of whatever. There were a lot of rocks in ice, and they floated really far. You can find rocks all the way down here, that just came down. All this dark brown stuff is where the water came, because as it came down the Columbia, it flowed into the mouth of the Willamette and went all the way through the Willamette Valley. So this is all deposited soil from the Missoula Floods, waterborne deposits. And then once the pressure was off, that plug went back down in, the lake filled up again, and about 75 years later, it lifted again. And it did this for about 1,200 years or so, just wave after wave, carrying all kinds of material with it. And in between the waves, the soil would dry out. The lightest particles, of course, always float to the top, and that kind of silty stuff started blowing eastward. So blowing this way, westward, blowing this way, and got caught in the hills all in here. That kind of soil is referred to as loess, L-O-E-S-S, right? So this is really the only deposits of Missoula flood loess in Oregon. There's lots of Missoula flood soils that were waterborne, but this is the airborne, the windborne soils. Very mineral rich, fair amount of clay, because clay is the smallest particle in the soil, and not particularly fertile, but it can get very deep in some spots, up to 100 feet deep.
Wow.
Underneath where we're standing was a redwood forest, coastal redwoods. The loess blew in and completely covered the redwoods. So underneath us, there's a whole redwood forest. I've had neighbors that, when drilling for wells, kick up chunks of redwood.
Wow.
So it's all underneath here. So this is all built up, and you can see where it is here. We're located right over here, Montinore. And and then this watershed, if you look at that, is the Tualatin River that flows into the Willamette River. So when we created the AVA, we saw that we had a natural boundary of the watershed of the Tualatin River, and we had a unique situation with this Missoula flood loess that is referred to mostly as Laurelwood series. It included the Chehalem Mountain here. Half of Chehalem Mountain, you can see, has loess. The other side is basalt, and a little bit of marine sedimentary soil.
Is that the area there that they're talking about renaming it?
Yeah, they want to call this Laurelwood.
AVA.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
And we worked with them, and
Yeah.
it's okay. We felt that Chehalem Mountain, much higher elevation, just it has its own unique kind of thing, because what happens here is on this side we have the highest peaks in the coastal range, over here. We're in the foothills of the coastal range, basically. And we get a lot of the prevailing winds out of the northwest that come in, kick up over those mountains, and then come back down and hit Chehalem Mountain, hit, Portland area especially, sort of this way. So they have a little different situation over there. And then, of course, there's this Tualatin River that comes through here too, separating us. So we felt this was a good boundary between what they're going to call Laurelwood and what we have as our Tualatin Hills. So the boundary goes from 200 feet, which is roughly around this border here. And why 200 feet? Anything below that, the soils change, the water level's higher. You just typically don't get very good wine in the lower flats. And the upper level corresponds to the boundary of the Willamette Valley AVA with 1,000-foot elevation, thinking that 1,000 feet is about as high as you're going to get without getting a lot of problems with frost and cold. So those are our two natural boundaries, 1,000-foot elevation and 200-foot elevation. We break off here by the Tualatin River and take it as far as here when you start getting into urban development.
Gotcha.
So that's the AVA.
Wow.
Yeah. Our other vineyard is here in this marine sedimentary soil over here. This is where Louis Jadot has their new winery being built. And,
Gotcha.
Maison Roy. And then the Chehalem Mountain one it's not on this map, but it's right up in here. It has a very interesting mix of soils. So.
Excellent.
Yeah, now we can see that.
Fascinating. Perfect.